Welcome back. In this class, we're going to talk about how to integrate your foster kids in with your natural kids in your family. It's a common concern for families that are beginning the foster care process to worry about their own children. We want you to worry about your own children. They really are a huge part of this and making your journey into foster care successful. The way that we are successful in integrating foster kids with the biological family is by creating good boundaries and good structure around what rules and expectations are going to be enforced for all of the kids in the home. Let's tackle a couple of issues right off the bat. These kids are not your children. It's going to take some time for them to adjust to your environment, to your rules, to your home. And anytime you add a person to your home, no matter how they come, it's going to disrupt the dynamics a little bit. If you go from having no kids to 2 foster kids, or if you have 2 biological children and you add a foster child, it really does affect the structure of your family, the amount of time that you have with your spouse and with your other children. And those are things that you should prepare for and expect as you kind of begin this process. It is true that your foster children need more supervision than your natural children do. And this isn't because they're scary or dangerous or anything like that. It simply boils down to you didn't raise them. They don't know the structure of your home, and they don't know what's okay and what's not okay. The best way that you can teach them is to closely supervise them. There is also a history of youth in foster care who have no history of offending or abuse of any kind to occasionally abuse a biological child or another foster child. And this is generally due to the fact that they're under-socialized. And what I mean by that is that they haven't had the normal, again, kind of rules and structure imposed that other people have. And they're in a new and scary environment. And so they might engage in behaviors that they wouldn't normally engage in. To protect them and your biological family from anything negative happening, we make sure that you provide the proper amount of structure and supervision in your home so that that doesn't happen. Hopefully comforting to know that an incest taboo will normally be established within a short time with your foster kids. And what that means is if you think about doing anything bad to your own biological siblings, there's kind of that kind of icky factor that takes place. That will actually happen with your foster kids as well over some time as they start to respond and relate to your kids as siblings. That incest taboo normally takes place fairly quickly. The best protection for everyone involved is just very good supervision and monitoring and some basic rules to keep everybody safe. By implementing increased supervision, it decreases any emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual experimentation or abuse that might happen, any visual or verbal abuse, criminal behavior, or any harm to youth and natural children. Frankly, is always a really difficult class to teach, and it's a difficult subject to talk about. There are sometimes negative stereotypes about foster children, that they will be damaging or harmful to your natural children. I would encourage you, honestly, to talk to your consultant about these concerns and talk to some of our current foster families about their own children and their concerns and how they have been effective in minimizing any risk to their own children. We have not had abuse against natural children within our agency, and we don't intend to. So I want you to be encouraged by that, mindful of supervision and monitoring, and want it to be a priority for you as well. And make sure that we're teaching our foster children the best possible ways to relate to people and not putting them in situations where they could do harm to themselves or other people. there was an act of perpetration, what was typically found, and this study is about 20 years old, so take it for what it's worth at this point, but the perpetrator was usually male, around the age of 15, and had been in the home for more than 2 years. They were in a less structured environment, and the foster parents were in a situation where they trusted the youth and often left them inappropriately unsupervised with a biological child. Also, at least 80% of the youth have a history of either physical, emotional, or sexual abuse in these situations. Perpetrator and the victim have been in the home for about 3 years, and that there comes a point where you do feel really comfortable with your foster children and you tend to let your guard down. In certain respects, that's very healthy. In many ways, we want you to treat these kids like they are your own. Open your heart to them. We want you to care about them. But also, it's very important to maintain a sense of healthy paranoia. Teenagers can engage in some sexual experimentation if they're put in a compromising environment. And we don't ever want to put our foster kids in that kind of an environment where they could put themselves at risk like that, or your children at risk. There are certain months of the year that are high-risk times because they're just less structured. And those are summer months, obviously, June, July, and August. Often kids are outside playing. They're wearing less clothing. There's a less structured day. Our intention in sharing this information with you is not to scare you in any way, but really just to educate you about maintaining that sense of it's your responsibility to monitor and supervise your foster children. What can you do? We really want to empower you to feel safe and that you are in control of your home environment. This is your home, and we want you to feel comfortable with the youth that are placed there, and also comfortable letting your kids have a relationship with your foster kids, because all intents and purposes, they will be and become siblings. So while you're maintaining some structure and setting up a safe environment, we also want you to feel comfortable with the youth that are going to be placed with you. The way that we do that is by having some areas of your home that are off limits, and that's okay. It's a sign of respect. They follow those rules, and that those rules apply to everyone in the home. For example, we don't ever leave natural children unsupervised with foster kids, really for any reason. Also, we require that everyone in the home wears a certain amount of, pajamas or sleepwear. Natural youth and foster youth don't play in bedrooms, that bedroom doors are not closed, that we don't build forts and do those kinds of things that create kind of a secretive or private environment. It's pretty common knowledge now in terms of making sure that kids don't access inappropriate things on the internet, that we keep our computers kind of out in a community area of the home. If they're not allowed to have kind of secret private things or private relationships, it's a family relationship, then you're much less likely to get into a situation of anything inappropriate happening. We monitor our youth every 7 to 12 minutes, and people sometimes laugh at that, 7 to 12, like why that number? That's kind of a weird number. And it really is random for a reason. If kids know that they're going to be checked on every 5 minutes or every 15 minutes, it's amazing how much trouble you can get in as any kind of a child if you know mom's going to be coming in about every 15 minutes. So sometimes it's a little bit shorter, sometimes it's a little bit longer. And the idea is to not let them know that you're coming in every 10 minutes, right? So that you can, and this is kind of good on two fronts because you can catch them being good. You can set them up to really be successful. If you say, I'll be back in 10 minutes and you come back in 7 and everyone's playing a board game and everyone's doing what they're supposed to do, then it's a huge and awesome opportunity for you to praise them for playing appropriately with each other. Behavior that you can watch for that's described as grooming behavior. And it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but youth who tend to bully or tease or put themselves in a higher power position or attempt to put themselves in a higher power position to other children in the home, whether foster or biological, those are behaviors that you want to have very low tolerances for and not tolerate, to teach to, and then increase your supervision with youth that are engaging in those behaviors. Help them channel that energy into other activities that are healthier for them and everyone in the family. It's great to praise appropriate play and appropriate affection. We never ever want you to be afraid of them or feel like you can't let your kids play with them or have relationships with them. They need that so badly. They need to have normal, loving, healthy, affectionate relationships with not only their siblings, but with adults as well. So there is definitely a balance that needs to be struck between what the rules are, and you don't ever have to be afraid of your foster children. We take very seriously the responsibility and the power that we hold in placing a youth in your home. We would never put a youth in your home that we knew had any history of anything inappropriate. With that said, sometimes we don't know everything about the youth that are placed with us, and it's a learning process for both of us. Your diligence in maintaining that structure, maintaining the supervision and monitoring, are really your best protection. Okay, so some basic structure and rules that we have found to be effective: not allowing your foster children to hold or pick up your little kids, like your 2, 3, 4-year-olds, not laying together or sharing blankets or making blanket forts or anything like that, not closing doors when more than one child is behind it. So of course we're going to allow the kids to close their bedroom door when they're changing, and they deserve the same amount of respect and privacy that anyone else deserves. So obviously they can close their door when they're changing and whatnot, but not allowing them to play or be in rooms with the door closed without an adult present, a standard rule. Also, everyone follows the same rules, and this helps with that bullying behavior that we were talking about before, because they will perceive you as more fair. If there's a huge discrepancy between the way that biological children are treated and the way that foster children are treated, that damages the relationship. It makes it so they really can't have a close relationship, because it develops kind of an us-them mentality between the two sets of siblings, and can be really damaging to the youth's progress, to your own children, because they tend to distance themselves because they feel not safe, even though there's not any reason to not feel safe. So it's really just helpful to have the same rules apply to everyone. And of course, those need to be age appropriate. You'll have different rules for a 2-year-old than you will for like a 16-year-old, but within kind of the same age range, it makes the most sense to have the same rules apply. We respect everyone's privacy and property in the same way, so that we don't allow natural children to play with the foster children's things, for example, and vice versa. It just creates, again, that sense of safety for everybody involved. There are several campaigns that are prevalent now talking about how to keep our children safe on the internet. I would really encourage anyone be involved in those campaigns. I believe one of them is called Fight the New Drug. And again, there are several of these. That's just one example. But internet safety is very important with this population because they are so susceptible to being victimized. Honestly, sometimes I swear they have a sticker on their forehead that just says, "I'm a target." And I don't know how it happens, but it's just very common for the kids that we work with to feel alienated, struggle to make close relationships, so they tend to fall prey to people on the internet at a higher percentage than the general population. The ways that we can combat this are making sure that our computer is in a common area of the home, making sure that the screen is visible from several angles, that it's not faced away from people. Any and every internet filter that you can provide, make sure that that's done. Our contract states that our kids in foster care cannot have social media or internet access unless their legal guardian allows that. So just making sure that you're following those rules, not allowing them to have social media accounts unless you have access to all of their passwords. We don't allow direct messaging that you don't have access to. It's funny because some parents have a false sense of security that if they turn off the Wi-Fi or if they have the ability to read their children's text messages, for example, that their kids can't still figure out a way to talk to each other. But with the direct messaging that's available on most social media, even if you have the ability to read their text messages, there's a high likelihood that you don't have the ability to read their direct messages, Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, for example. Understanding that you'll never be as savvy as the teenagers are because they always know more than we do. Don't trust your internet blocker. They're really easy to get around. Also, make sure you're doing random checks to see what they're accessing. Make sure that they have a daily limit to the amount of media that they have, and that includes everything. Phones and social media, computers, all of those things really can wire the brain for anxiety and depression disorders because there's a kind of instant gratification that we get when we get on the computer or we get on our phone or we get on social media, that hit of dopamine that our brain gets if somebody likes our post or follows us or does those things. It creates a false environment in our brain, actually, that sets our kids up for more anxiety and for more depression. So limiting the time that they spend on it will be really beneficial in helping their brain chemistry to maintain kind of a more normal, natural balance. As they use it productively and effectively, they can earn more time. Once you've established yourself as a foster parent, it can become really tempting to let your children monitor your foster kids or vice versa, depending on the ages of your children versus your foster children. We don't ever allow children to monitor children. Even if they're older than 18 years old, you have to be 21 to be licensed as a foster parent. We do have a couple of great foster families that are like a mother and a child situation, but the child is over 21 and has been fully trained. The situation we're talking about is really, can you watch so-and-so while I run to the grocery store? Can you watch so-and-so while I take so-and-so to school? And the answer to those questions, unfortunately, is no. They can't. If you do have a child in the home that's over 18, our contract requires that they have a BCI, which is a background check, and that's just a rule for anyone in foster care. Ultimately, as the adults, we are the ones that are responsible for the children, so we have to figure out a way to supervise them without asking our children to do that or without asking foster children to supervise our biological children. As with everything that we do, there is definitely a balance between our relationship with the children and our boundaries in the relationship. If there is ever a violation of a boundary, for example, if you accidentally walk in on a child while they're showering or using the bathroom or vice versa, you're human again, you're in a home, these things are going to happen. Don't be afraid of them, but do report them. And that's the best way that we can advocate for you if anything like that happens, is that if you just immediately report it, and then we will help report the incident to the caseworker so that everybody's on the same page about what happened and that there wasn't any ill intent in anything that happened. Kids will sometimes say that they want to tell you a secret. Very careful with the youth to distinguish the difference between a surprise and a secret. If we're keeping a surprise for somebody's birthday, let's say, we bought them a present and we don't want to tell them what it is, that's a surprise, right? Because they're eventually going to know. We don't keep secrets with our foster youth. You, as the adult, find yourself kind of disclosing confidences to your foster kids. That is a violation of your boundaries. As a professional, you shouldn't ever be disclosing anything secret or private to your foster children, and vice versa. We are not allowed to keep our foster children's secrets, especially in connection to any abuse or neglect that has happened in the past. We are mandatory reporters. In a situation where a child says, I'm going to tell you this, but you can't tell anybody else. And over the course of my career, that has happened several times. And it is very hard because when you tell them, if you tell me something, I may have to report it, they might not tell you. And that's really hard. Can't keep secrets. And we also don't ever want to lie to them. If a child says, I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody, and you say, okay, I won't tell, and then they tell you some horrific abuse that happened that you are mandated to report, then you have lied to them. And we don't ever want to put you in a situation where you would lie to them just to get them to talk to you. The foundation of trust, the foundation of integrity and honesty is paramount in helping everybody. We as an agency will advocate for you. We will support you. We understand that no one is infallible. You may make a mistake and swear at a foster child. That will occasionally happen. It's rare, and we, of course, don't want it to happen, but it does occasionally happen. Make sure you're communicating with your consultant about any incident that may have violated boundaries or may have violated youth rights. But if something happens that is inappropriate, the first person that you want to contact is your consultant. Respond with controlled emotion. If something upsetting has happened to the child, they will often mirror your emotion. So if you become too upset by it, it might actually upset them more to see how upset you are. So making sure that your emotions are in check is really important. Making sure that you increase your monitoring and teaching of anything that has happened. That's why your first phone call should be to your consultant, because they will provide direction to you in terms of whether the caseworker needs to know, the therapist, if it needs to be reported to Child Protective Services. It's really scary to think about making that phone call. We have had foster kids make that threat to their foster parents. If you make me eat those peas, I'm going to call Child Protective Services. It's one of those buttons that they kind of learn to push, right? They will make threats that they know will scare and intimidate you to keep you from doing what you're supposed to do with them. If you haven't done anything wrong, you really don't have anything to fear from a call to Child Protective Services. They are very professional. They are very experienced. They will not find someone at fault if they have done nothing wrong. And of course, this is all in my experience, but I have been doing this for over 20 years and have never had a foster parent found guilty of something that they didn't do. And even for things that they did do. My example of if you've sworn at a child, that is a violation of youth rights, but it's not anything that lose your child your foster care license for. We are working with humans. They understand that we're working with humans. So as intimidating as it might be to think about what CPS means or what Child Protective Services means, as long as you are doing what you're supposed to do and using your consultant in an appropriate way and calling them with any questions or concerns you have, it is our responsibility to advocate for you and support you in situations that have to do with your foster kids. If one of your foster children does something abusive to one of your other foster children, we will immediately take steps to make sure that that child who has offended is moved to a safer, more appropriate environment, and that we will take care of the victim in your home and whatever they need. These situations are so rare, but we do want you to be prepared for them so that they won't scare you or intimidate you, but that you will feel like you have a foundation to deal with them. So at the end of this class, there will be a series of questions that we will ask you about situations that you may find yourself in, how you would handle those situations. And again, There may be a right answer and a wrong answer, or a better way to handle it than another way to handle it. Really, the purpose of these questions is to kind of find out what your thinking process is, and then your consultant will review those questions with you and help you understand where your instincts are right and where your instincts might be, need to be tweaked a little bit to put yourself and your family in the safest place possible. That's all we have for this class. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to your consultant, and we will see you at the next class.